you're not blocking people out, you're bringing them in. You're not creating this resentment. Again, the resentment that I had when I was younger, because I had this fuck you to the system attitude, because I just felt like it wasn't making the effort to communicate with me. But at the end of the day, I had to make I had to communicate with it. And now that I've started doing that, I can see lights, coming at the end of the tunnel here and there, and say, here's an option, possibility, and opportunity, not just like.
Yo. Welcome back, Mr. Philip Halton, our most recurring guest. I think now this is a third appearance, possibly.
Can't shut me up.
Yeah, man. Well, it's good to have you back. And we have, I suppose, a specific topic to be discussing of one matter of preserving the Portobello. And not turning
thanks for that.
To shite.
I think having a long form discussion on it actually is a lot easier than trying to put across Instagram posts with minimal messaging and stuff, because I think a lot of information gets kind of lost when it's dulled down onto social media platforms a lot of the time.
Sure. Absolutely. So what's going on, man? You kind of outlined it briefly for me, but for people listening, what's the story? Funny enough, I pulled out an issue 1 of Goblin, the first one that we done back in 2018, and I actually I flicked onto a page and kind of forgot that I'd written this, but it was just talking about what the future essentially was going to be for Portobello and how it was likely to pan out, and except for COVID, it was pretty much on the money. And basically, when the Hotel Planning Commission went in back in around 2018, the plaza was always going to be under some sort of threat, I suppose you could call it, or its future was a little bit blurry. But the Planning Commission got accepted. Construction took effect there about 2 years ago. COVID held things up, but it's now, the ball is rolling again. In the last couple of months, or weeks rather, a hoarding was erected around probably about 70% of the public space, and it's being used for storage space by the contractor who's carrying out the building works. So that's going to be gone for a minimum period of about 18 months to 2 years. Obviously, that's a major social hub in Dublin, and one of the most popular go-to places, let's say, on a sunny day, but also one of the main skateboarding locations in Dublin and probably Ireland, I suppose you could argue as well. In the next couple of weeks, early March, there's going to be a public consultation with Dublin City Council asking for the public to come in and give their opinions on what they'd like to see there in the near future. But there was a lot of high emotion around the summertime because lockdowns being lifted, young people being young people, everyone was kind of going out on the rip a little bit, and then there was a lot of late night drinking and I suppose antisocial behavior, you could call on the
it
canal,
as well.
I suppose.
On the canal, yeah. I mean, look, the problems that were always kind of behind the curtain somewhat, or at least on the surface of things, were the urination and then probably late night drinking.
Yeah, I've definitely never done that myself. Anyway, for anybody listening,
But of course, these are situations that could have been remedied with, look, if you wanted to do temporary toilets, perhaps, or if you wanted to have probably better and more bins, let's say. Yeah, so obviously around the time that the lockdowns were lifted, there was just a lot of late night drinking and stuff on the canal, and then things that could have been remedied, like temporary toilets, could have been installed earlier, or more bins and whatnot. Rather than fencing it off, which is what eventually happened. I think if there was a bit of thought put into it sooner, we could have avoided a lot of the high emotion that took place. So, in the coming weeks, it's going to be really important to try and engage with as many people as possible. General public, the stakeholders, the hotel, the residents, the guards, the councillors, everyone. Everyone's going to have a say on this, and I think it is possible for Portobello to be a really, really good example of public space and planning in Dublin if it's done right. However, if tensions are raised, if people aren't getting along, if there's no, if reason is left, then you could end up with quite the opposite. So I've been in contact with most parties now at this stage, and everyone is on board, pretty much to say that what we want here is a really good public space. We want something that is, multi-use, that is, welcoming to everybody. We don't want something that's, overwhelmingly, just for hotel users, or overwhelmingly just for skateboarders, or overwhelmingly just for residents. We want something that is, at the end of the day, Rathmines, Portobello, that area is one of the most diverse and one of the most welcoming, best communities in the entire country. And I think we could create a space that, that really supports that. So that's the idea.
Yeah, man, there's a lot in there, Jesus, to tease apart. I mean, so just because I'm still kind of ignorant about this, I knew somewhat about the building of the hotel there, that there is a hotel going up. I didn't realize that the hoarding around it, or the kind of like fenced off area, was to support the builders as they're doing work in the hotel. And that's a public space. Is that an issue, or is that just like, that's kind of...
it is an issue, yeah, because you do lose the amenity. Like, the space itself will be lost for about 18 months to 2 years, and eventually it will be redesigned. I think that's pretty much a given at this stage. And that's why the long-term goal is to turn it into a space that's really, really works for a lot of people. But, in the short term, it's a problem. I mean, you wouldn't see that happen to Stephen's Green, Merrion Square, something like that. We wouldn't just border off parts of those parks so that a builder could use it for storage space. But obviously, my background in construction, I have some...
would have thought, you'd know what's going on.
Yeah, and look, it does happen in certain situations, particularly in tight locations and spaces where, construction is very difficult. That road is a residential road. There's an argument in there that that many stories and beds of a hotel really shouldn't have been put there in the first place, and this has to have been thought through. Maybe it wasn't, but anyway, look, to facilitate the construction and make it happen quicker so that the space is then given back sooner, I do understand it. Sense. I mean, it makes sense to a degree, and it is upsetting to see it, taken off like that, and there is an argument, a strong argument against it, but also on top of that, it is going to help, the safety of the neighborhood too, because again, it's a very, very tight road. I can just about get my own van down there most days, so backing in trucks and deliveries and whatnot, it is difficult. So I do empathize with the situation, and I understand it. I think my focus is more on the consultation, and more on like the design going forward in the future. I think that's going to be really, really important,
so you think
a lot of my energies are there.
So that the hotel ship has sailed. There's going to be a hotel there. It's kind of what's going to be done with this space, which is like at the moment there, to paint a picture for people, I suppose, you've got the canal on one side, you have this open area, you've got benches, you've got things for bikes. It's facing onto that pub. What's the name of it again? The lower bar stool. The lower deck. That's definitely different, just made up name. But facing onto that, and it's an area that people would go, drink cans, but people would skateboard, people would hang out there during the day, drink coffees. Like, it's a real social place. It's one of the few places in Dublin actually that I'm pretty sentimental about, is that bit of the canal. It's the only kind of place that reminds you almost like of somewhere a bit more, I don't know, European or something, or it's more kind of like, it has a particular vibe to it that you can't really get in other places. Even other bits of the canal, you don't really get that. So whenever I saw the fences going up and everything, I was like, oh, right, that's gone now. I suppose that's the end of that one. And I wonder what prompted for you the reaction then to say, I'm going to go take this on, like, because I saw that and I was just like, duh. I didn't have that kind of, you're taking it on. You're taking on the challenge. What was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's another part-time job on top of several other ones.
Yeah, and you're doing 80 million things already. So
but at the end of the day, I have been waiting for this moment for years now. I mean, a good 5 years I've, been anticipating this, and at the same time just tried to just look. When I was younger, I think my attitude was fuck Dublin City Council, fuck the hotel, fuck these people, blah blah blah. But I've grown up a little bit since then, and just realised actually, you know what, you can't win in that sort of attitude a lot of the time. So so just trying to take a more democratic approach to it, I suppose, and just, or diplomatic, and really just trying to reach out to people, because at the end of the day, this is actually what worked for Weaver Park, Cork Street, which turned out to be one of the best parks that have been built in this country in years and years and years.
Yep.
And that all came through just consultation between residents, between the council, between councillors, everybody that was involved, So, and we ended up with a fantastic space. And I think something similar can happen in Portobello
But actually, to be honest, I think we can one up it. I think we can do even better if we try. So, yeah, the idea there is to just get people have to be reasonable about the space. Not everyone is going to be, get exactly what they wanted, and there is going to be compromise. There's going to be compromise on behalf of residents, on behalf of skateboarders, the hotel users, the council. Everyone has to compromise here, because that is how you end up with, with the best outcome really for everyone. A little bit of everything. Ideally for me, I'd love to see, some sort of art installation that doubles up as a skate obstacle in the center of that space, or things that kids can use, and look, intergenerational sort of obstacles and objects and stuff that you can have there, so that parents can come, kids can come, they can skate, they can kick a ball around, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be tons of money put into this. It doesn't have to be a lot of, obstacles and clutter. It can be quite an open space that's just accepting of activities. I suppose it's an interesting thing to note that the hotel will be contributing somewhere in the region of, I believe, upwards of maybe 400 or 500 grand to the redesign of the plaza. And of course, to do that, they're going to want to have a strong say in exactly how it's designed. For sure. Now, that kind of does change the power balance of what the design is going to be, obviously, because if they're putting up the money for this, they're going to say, okay, well, we want to have quite a large say in what's going to be outside of our hotel. This is our business. It's our investment. We want to control that somewhat. So, but again, as long as it's reasonable, and as long as it's, with the good of the public in mind as well, I don't see why that would be an issue. I've been onto the project manager on behalf of juries, and nice guy, spoken about it, and again, we all seem to be on the same page. Obviously, the devil is in the detail when it comes to the design, and that's going to be incredibly important. So at the minute, I'm kind of liaising with a friend who is in an architectural firm, and they're happy to come on, do some pro bono stuff, and get involved, put a couple of designs together, and see what the space can offer, because it is actually quite a small space. But look, this is a stepping stone as well, and it's educational for me, for everyone who gets involved, really and truly, for going forward too, and even just getting into contact with councillors and with council executives and whatnot. I can see that the attitude towards skateboarding particularly is changing, quite dramatically, and I do think that's because of positives of Weaver Park and Cork Street, of maybe Ballyfermot Skate Park, and a couple other examples. So going forward, I actually think that skateboarding, it's possible that Dublin is going to take on a really progressive approach to it, and we could start utilising public spaces all around Dublin that are kind of underutilised right now, and we just attract people like skateboarders or similar activities and whatnot. It could be football again, could be anything, but I think there is real opportunity here to change the face of Dublin, and it's needed, because Dublin suffered more than most capitals around the world since COVID. It was really left out to dry. We've seen how desolate and to be honest, how dangerous Dublin streets can become when there's not very many people there. So you really want people in the city. And Portobello, it's designed right now, and the same with Weaver Park. It allows for safety because it's visible at night time through lighting, and just through basically being on the street level, and in a very populated area. And that's what makes people feel safe a lot of the time as well, is knowing that there's other people around you in case something happens. The likelihood is that someone will step in, or maybe call the guards, or whatever it is. But it is a very important part about designing a safe public space, So yeah, again, it's going to be in the design. That's where really, really intelligent decisions will have to be made. And if it's done correctly, then we're in for a fantastic jewel in Dublin's crown.
Yeah, man, there's so much in there that you're touching on. There's something kind of that's coming up in me, and that this is very symbolic or kind of emblematic. You said it's an educational opportunity, and that's kind of what I'm hearing as well, because there's been so much, I suppose, disgruntling for people in Dublin that I've spoken to, and even in myself, about the massive change happening in the city so quickly, and things like hotels where you feel like you don't have a say over it, or you don't have any control, and it's just happening, and there's cranes everywhere, and it's all transforming, and who knows what's going to come next, and is it going to be the city that you want it to be? And so this, I think, is a really interesting kind of microcosm of that larger problem that I see going on. And that's why I want to dig into it a little bit more, because it's about social action, and about also, how to address problems that seem like they're on a macro level, or that they're, these big, economic, political, massive problems that an individual can address. And so I wanted to kind of dig a little bit more into how you've been doing that and how you've gone about it. And so who was the first person that you contacted about it? Or did you have a plan in mind? Did you think, I'm going to do this now? Or did somebody say what to do?
Yeah, well, again, I've actually had so much time to think about this over the years. And then again, from the background of construction and just a general interest in planning, in how that process works, it fascinates me, to be honest. I'm really, really interested in the planning system, in just how this operates and how things are built. How, as much as buildings interest me, I'm just as interested about the stories behind them and how they came to be and stuff like that, and that goes from any century in Dublin to today, from 400 or 500 years ago. It doesn't matter. I'm fascinated by it. So I've always had that interest anyway. And I do think that it's a stumbling block to people who are affected by planning decisions or potential planning decisions, who don't have that sort of same knowledge or maybe background into how these systems operate. And that's why I'm hoping that people are reasonable enough regarding Portobello that it doesn't become political, because when it becomes political, emotions get quite high. And reason is oftentimes thrown out the window, and then what you'll end up with is bad decision making, essentially. Popular or populist decision making, or something like
tribal
that. Which I really
groups
hope
against each other.
It's exactly what happened when Portobello got fenced off. Like, it's a prime example of what happens when emotions are high, no one's being reasonable, and then the space is taken away for everyone. That is exactly what happened, and it can happen again in a negative way in the design unless people are really, really reasonable about this. I know a lot of people aren't going to be happy with me saying that, but it's the truth, and it's just how it's how the system is set up. Look, back in 2018, I still knew a bit about planning and whatnot, but over the years, I've just come to know more, and it's why I kind of expected all of these things to happen. The road opening license, taking away the plaza for however long, and so on and so forth. But the planning system, it's not irresistible to change, but from an individual point of view, it's like trying to shift a massive rock. It's very difficult to do on your own.
That's kind of what I was thinking, and what I'm really kind of trying to get at, I suppose, is how do you shift that rock, or how do you see that rock that might look unmovable to some people? I mean, how are you going to move it?
I think it's really about just planting the seed of an idea of saying, okay, well, let's incorporate skateboarding into this first and foremost, and you'll have my help and so many other people's help, and we'll come together on this and make a fantastic space, just as long as we're listened to and we can, put our thoughts into this process, because really and truly, I think skateboarding is a fantastic way to integrate public space in around cities. And we're seeing that in places like Malmo and Copenhagen and Barcelona and Paris. It's happening in a lot of little pockets around Europe, and it's working really, really well. And there's no reason for us not to jump on that. And Weaver Park, again, in Cork Street, is a fantastic example of it. We've done this already successfully in Dublin, and we can do it again in Portobello. But yeah, regarding where to start when it comes to the planning, right now I'm trying to set up with a couple of the people, the Irish Skateboarding Association, and the entire idea behind this is that it's going to be, skateboarding's first sporting body, fully recognized, and will eventually be able to get grants and whatnot. But also, it's going to teach people how to engage with your local council, how to petition for your skate park, or maybe get it updated, get lights in it, more bins, seats, whatever it is. Let's just create the best spaces we possibly can for skateboarding and for public spaces in general. Because when a public space is done well, then everybody wins, really and truly.
Sure.
So that's on the long term. And again, Portobello is the first major fight of this, of the Irish Skateboarding Association. It's going to be a real testing ground, and again, if it's done right, then it can be used all across the country. I think in many different towns as a prime example of what a successful public space looks like.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, because I mean, these, as I said, a microcosm of a bigger problem. And sometimes, I think a lot of time people think you have to change the whole system or something, or you have to tackle these problems on the hugest level. But in reality, what you do is you create a new case, and the new model then changes the paradigm. So like you're saying with Weaver Park, that allows a precedent for you to then go and do what you're doing. Whereas if there is no precedent and you go out and make one, you can change the model that people are using. You don't have to do it everywhere all at once. Something like Portobello is a perfect example of how you can create a new paradigm for these types of spaces. But how, you know, it's a hard thing to get. I think a lot of people would dismiss it as impossible or something. That's kind of my intuition, would be that people wouldn't. Well, maybe I'm thinking that personally, but it's very easy to just say, oh, it's hopeless, or, you know, why would I bother when it comes to big things like planning, hotels, city councils, you know. And what's your experience been? Are people willing to negotiate with you? Are people willing to talk to you? Are you running into walls? You know,
no. I think I've been blessed just to meet people who are, you know, very open to talk and open to the conversation, reasonable and stuff like that. And again, like, you know what, this is an attitude I think I held for a long time of saying kind of like, fuck the authorities and stuff like that, you know. But they had, I had this attitude of, you know, they don't care about us, they're not engaging with us, blah blah blah. But at the same time, man, it is entirely up to you as a citizen, as a skateboarder, whatever it is, to engage with them, because they don't know. I talked to one of the executives for Dublin City Council recently, and had a fantastic meeting. Really got along, completely on the same page on a lot of subjects, right? And he was actually involved in building the Cabra skate park years and years ago. Now, this is as far as skate parks go. It didn't really work out that well. It was modular, fenced off. I think you had to pay in, plus you had to wear helmets. Just a lot of no-nos for a skate park or for attracting kids to go to it, right? But, you know, at the time he was saying, well, we didn't know what was good and what was bad and stuff like that, you know, because they just didn't really know where to look to engage in it. And this is why the Skating Association has to be set up as a legitimate body for councils to turn to and say, these are the guys who know exactly, you know, what is good and what is bad. Let's turn to them, get their advice in it. You know, again, it's just about sharing information, being reasonable, being kind, and then creating relationships that go forward in the future. I'm hoping that Portobello is successful. I'm also hoping that it leads to, you know, future possibilities and opportunities for skateboarding around Ireland, you know, because, you know, it's crying out for it in a lot of ways, you know, and look, as daunting as the system is to come against it, you know, a lot of will, patience, and just wanting to learn and really understand how things work, and being humble about that approach too will get you quite far, you know. And it's been a long time. Look, I have stacks and stacks of books all about Dublin, planning, buildings, all of this stuff. And in some way, you know, I am interested by it, of course, but it's always been in a sort of a lead up to this point of being like, I know at some stage this information is going to really be necessary to change things for, you know, a positive manner or whatever it is. That's why I think most people who look at my bookshelf would be incredibly bored within 5 minutes. But to me, it's very interesting, you know, because they're all little snippets of how things change over time within a city, right? And the power structures that were once there that are no longer there, that had influence or now have influence, and seeing it changing all the time is fascinating to me. You know, I try not to hold a lot of emotional grudges towards the way things are or how they are and stuff like that, because I just want to look at it from a fascinating point of view, that it's an amazing approach humans take towards creating the places that they live in, like the planning system alone, you know, and it's had massive hiccups throughout its history, and arguably it's not really fit for purpose for anybody. I don't know. I don't think it's really fit for purpose for people looking to buy or build their own homes, or the people who are looking to build these homes. You know, a lot of the time it's a long bureaucratic process, very difficult to get through, and frankly, it's very unattractive to build in Ireland a lot of the time because it's so unpredictable. I think that Sweden follow a really good model a lot of the time, where if you have, you know, they have their city development plan, which we do also have, but in their development plan, they'll give you, they'll basically give you your height requirement that you're allowed to go to on that street, how many bedrooms you might have to have, what the size of the house may even have to be. But the design is entirely up to you, so you can get creative on the architecture and whatnot. Whereas in Dublin and within Ireland, you just don't know whether or not that site that you have is going to actually be allowed to be built on because of so many issues. And we do have a massive problem with, we have a massive problem with what, you know, you describe as NIMBYism, you know, not in my backyard. That is a huge issue in Ireland. There's a lot of people who feel threatened by new developments, understandably so. Some of them are very, very poorly planned and just designed to get max capacity of people for max rents, not even to be sold. So those are the developments where you'd say, are these really benefiting the area that we're at? You know, there is always a finite resources of builders to do the work and a finite resource of land to actually build it on. So we best put that to best use if we're to solve this housing crisis, and more generally to design cities for the best, you know?
Yeah, and that's again on the macro. Like you said something so interesting at the start there, which was that, I mean, did you ever expect that the city council person that you went to speak to, the executive, built a skate park? Like, why did he build a skate park? Is he into skate? Like, because this is something I've come across. Like, because I've been doing loads of stuff in tech, and obviously looking at the problems of tech and using philosophy to try and build better models for creating technology, but also you can look at it like, oh, the evil empire, or like there's this, you know, people get caught up in conspiracy thinking a lot now that there's a they and that there's a big, you know, cabal of people working against you. But then when you actually go and talk to people in these things, they're all people. Like everybody's, you know, you go to meet a housing executive or city council executive and he's into skating, or like I go and talk to somebody and, you know, they're into martial arts, and you start to build this relationship. And I've kind of had the sense of like, oh my God, it's all just people. There isn't this, you know, the dark Darth Vader emperor kind of, at least not that I've met anyway. And that if you actually go and talk to the people, you can build a relationship with them, and that you can change things by doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. And you have to be, like, you know, reasonable again, and sort of compromise humility on certain things. And yeah, you got to be, you know, that there is humility to it as well. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, look, these systems are set up oftentimes over a long period of time, and there's all these little things that get added to oftentimes stop previous problems they've had, or corruption, or whatever it is. That's why these processes are very lengthy, and there's a lot of obstacles within them designed to protect the system from corruption, I suppose, you know. But then obviously within that you get inefficiency, right? You know, you get a lot of slow decision making, and a lot of confusion, a lot of bureaucracy, and a lot of confusion. You know, there's so much in the planning system that is difficult to understand or know, and it's very easy to come out, you know, thump your chest, say this is wrong, fuck this, fuck that. But at the end of the day, to change these systems, you need to get into the nitty gritty of them and understand them, frankly, because it's very hard to change things. Other than that, now, you had a conversation recently with Mannix Flynn. I got to speak to Mannix for half an hour on the phone call, you know, just on and on. Of course, he won't stop talking. I won't stop talking. So, but it was really interesting.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and like his point was like, you know, really and truly, what you want to do is, okay, Portobello is there's a fight on there, of course, but in the long term future, what you actually want to be doing is changing the Dublin City Development Plan to include skateboarding in it, so that if you have an underutilized public space, you know, it's within the plan of the council, you know, to, as it's changing the city, to incorporate skateboarding within it, not just for skate parks by any means, but actually just within the little pocket parks or whatever it may be, public spaces. And I would love to see within that development plan an approach against defensive architecture, you know, metal spikes, balls, whatever it is, the type of things that, you know, deter people from sitting down, sleeping, skating, whatever it is. I do think that they're a complete cancer upon a city, and they're very, very hostile. Hostile architecture is another name for them. 100%. Well. I would really love to see the development plan change, that they can no longer be, you know, included. Look, there's always going to be situations where it's not ideal to have people doing certain activities or whatever it is. But again, there is more intelligent ways to design these rather than these blunt approaches, you know. So, so that would be the idea, you know. And look,
Mannix
again,
is a great. Sorry, go ahead. I was cut across.
Oh no, but sorry, but again, like that would be, you know, an example of how another thing gets added to this system of bureaucracy, right? And that, oh well, we can't put in these skate stoppers, so we have, you know, it's adding to the list all the time. And again, what it is really and truly is you're building on previous past mistakes, and again, that's how that system gets so confusing and very, you know, very hard to mitigate. But it's an example of why that is, you know.
Yeah, and that there's, I mean, Mannix is a great example of that, because he's like, the life he's had, which is so unbelievable, and like has been through so much as a person, then as an artist, and then going into politics with, I think, the same mentality that you're describing here, which is, you know, whether you agree with him or not, he believes in something, and he's gonna learn about planning, and he's gonna learn about, you know, he's gonna be in the drainage meeting on Monday morning, and he's gonna, you know, go through it again and again and again, and he's not going to stop. And that kind of, like, that's most of us, I suppose, want to complain about things, but you don't want to get your hands dirty. You don't want to read the books. You don't want to show up every day. You don't want to do the boring things. And I think that's the reality of actual social change. It's not just the protest. It's not just, you know, going and shouting at people or, you know, wrecking things. it is a very slow process of negotiation, of refinement, of learning, of development. And then maybe you can do what you're doing, which is to create a different kind of model for the future. I mean, that wouldn't be good just for skateboarding. Anybody that's trying to start something that wants then to get their thing into, you know, the council budget or to be considered for open spaces, you've then left a path that people can follow for that, which could potentially lead to who knows what. And that's really what the attitude, I think, is so important, man.
Yeah, and that's the whole goal then behind that skate association, is to do exactly what you're saying there, so that it's basically just teaching people how to interact with these systems, with the people who are kind of, you know, the gatekeepers of them, or whatever you want to call it, you know. So a lot of it is education. Look, you don't learn about the planning system in school, you know. Maybe there's classes where actually that'd be incredibly handy to know why it is that your bus route goes this way, or why you live so far from a train, or, you know, why it is that your public park is only X amount of, you know, of size, and then this person's public park is that big, and, you know, it's really interesting. I suppose they're specialist subjects that only people who might go into construction or architecture might start to dwell on a little bit, and even within those courses, it's probably a very small part of it, you know, unless you're going in to do planning itself. But again, yeah, like it is so important to you know, everything, and like from a skateboarder's point of view, you spend a lot of your life in cities just navigating them through streets and trying to find spaces that you like to hang out in, that you like to skate, which ones are better and worse, and why that is, and you know, you get to understand what public and private really means. You know, I don't think people really like take into consideration that too much, but when you go to somewhere like Grand Canal Docks, you realize that it's a lot more sterile, because there's an atmosphere created there of more, you know, privatization, let's say, you know. People might not realize it that quickly, but the bin collection is often privatized. The parking meters and the clamping is privatized, and the security is privatized. You know, there's private security wandering around everywhere telling people what they can and cannot do. That's a huge difference to Portobello. Portobello is and always has been, you know, a publicly controlled and operated space by the council, right? You didn't have private security there telling you off. The council came and they collected the bins, they came and swept the place, and they've done X, Y, and Z. There's actually a massive difference even within that itself. You know, there's this there's a power balance that lies with the council, I think, more so on your side oftentimes than privatization, because, you know, both of them oftentimes are big organizations with structures and whatnot, but, you know, at least on the council side of things, you do have a little bit more right to that space rather than if it was private, you know. So if this same situation was happening in Grand Canal Dock, there's pretty much nothing you could do, unless you found someone who is very, very on your side, or you know, willing to participate on the private owners
within the company themselves,
a lot of the time, or within the company itself. Yeah. Whereas the council do have, like, you know, an obligation to you as a citizen to provide you with amenities and facilities, you know. So, and again, it doesn't have to be a negative thing against, you know, they versus us. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we're all in this together. We all live in the same place. We want to see, you know, the best possible outcome. Obviously, there's different philosophies there, but as long as people are reasonable and you're willing to compromise on certain things, there's no reason why you can't turn out with a really, really good space, or you know. And this doesn't even just have to go for public spaces, by the way. This would go for venues or whatever it may be, events, all of this type of thing. You know, it's again, it's just about engaging, knowing the right thing to say, when to say it, and just being humble and learning, I suppose. You know, like, this is going to be a massive learning block for me. I'm not getting paid to do any of this stuff, but it's going to require quite a lot of work. Outside of working 6 days a week on a building site, it's going to require consistently talking to, you know, all of these stakeholders that are involved, and I do think it's worth it. I mean, my participation in Cork Street and Weaver Park from a very young age, and only, you know, like as a sort of a kid in this process, looking at the adults taking the lead, but just obviously being supportive and being part of it, like getting to go to Weaver Park and knowing that long after I'm gone, that's going to be there, you know, supplying people with happiness. Like, that's amazing, you know. So whatever short-term effort and work we have to put in, I think for the long-term benefit, it could work out really, really well for Portobello, for more spaces than even just Portobello, but just, you know, more generally. I think there's a real opportunity in there to change Dublin and Ireland more generally for the better.
And that people will gravitate towards that, man. I'm getting a real sense of your vision for it, and like that's something that's very appealing when you can tell somebody cares about something a lot and has, you know, a vision for it that matters to them. That really will keep you going in life, I think, through so much shit, like, and even though it's difficult and it's a responsibility and you don't get paid for it and stuff, it does give you a sense of meaning as well. I think you kind of need that,
definitely,
something to be, you know, pursuing.
Yeah, that's 100%. I mean, like you kind of question it. You know, most people, like, the day to day is, you know, the meaning might lie, you know, mostly within work and then family, and then maybe like hobbies and stuff like that as well. Like for me, there's a lot of meaning within Portobello, and that's the reason that gets me to then decide to make a phone call, have a meeting, try and do all of this stuff. It's not motivated by, you know, anything other than sort of the passion or the, you know, to be honest, the knowledge that I've gained over the years to see what public spaces like Portobello can do, because I witnessed it I started skateboarding at Portobello. I started skateboarding because of Portobello, at Portobello, with a good few friends from primary school. A good few of them were living in Charlemagne Street Flats, which is now demolished. But a lot of them also then stopped when that space was taken away from them because of skate stoppers and whatnot, you know. And I don't think that helped anyone. I really don't believe that decision helped anybody. It was misinformed. It was, you know, it's just short-sighted thinking, and it led to a lot of, I think, anger and just, you know, general disappointment or whatever between the community of skateboarding and between Dublin City Council. And I think there's a chance now to repair that. You know, there's different people involved in these things now, but you know, we didn't have to lose the time at Portobello that we lost over the last 10 or so years because of those skate stoppers, and we didn't have to lose a lot of those young people who decided to leave the activity because of it, and, you know, oftentimes end up in activities that weren't so good for them, you know. So
and you think it's something you should be encouraging for young people to do if it's something that will, you know, keep them away from, I mean, that's a really good way of putting it, that if you block them skateboarding, you actually open up an avenue to other stuff. And I mean, there's plenty of trouble that you can get into as a young person. To have something like skateboarding that gives you a sense of meaning and a sense of community as well. I'm sure it can get you into lots of trouble also, but it could be something that, you know, becomes, that keeps you on the straight and narrow, I suppose, to use a bit of a cliche. But that's kind of coming towards something else, which is the other issue, I suppose, which is with Portobello. I guess the issue that the residents have always had is like the antisocial behavior, that it gets sunny, everybody goes drink there, I'm there with like a bunch of car packy and, you know, outside their house, and nobody's too happy about it. How do you manage Irish people? Like, we're so good at taking a beautiful place and ruining it by having too much crack.
Yeah, it's true.
How does that?
It's true in a lot of situations, and it's a good question. And I honestly can say that I don't know, outside of certain control measures that you can try put in place. I would hate to see a fence around that space, to be honest. I think it'll really change the dynamic of it. It'll make it a lot less welcoming. There's probably a lot of residents there who won't accept it. Will maybe happily accept even a skate park, but not necessarily that's what we're looking for. But they won't accept anything without a fence. I could kind of see that happening because, you know, people have to respect the space at the end of the day. Otherwise, it is ruined on everybody, you know. But it's not an excuse either to not build the space or have it there for people, because I always say this, like, if you've got a park or a skate park or something like that, and there's, say, 400 people who use it a day, there's 5 people every day or week that, you know, that do something bad in it, let's say. But then shutting down the entire space because of those 5 people then puts 395 people at a disadvantage, or, you know, puts them basically as being in the bowl class. You know, everyone in the class suffers then because of it, you know, and it's not worth it. So what do? You just try mitigation things. Now, I have to say the communication between the council and just the general public about Portobello has been absolutely terrible, and that's why there's so many people really pissed off about this and emotional about it, and rightly so, to be honest with you, because you can't just take an entire space away and not come out to the public and say, this is why we have to do this. Like, if they were to come out reasonably and say something along the lines of, this is actually going to speed up the construction, it's going to make the area safer within the meantime, people would be like, okay, maybe I can accept that a little bit easier than I can accept the entire space being taken away without any commentary on it at all. I think that's a big communication error that they're making consistently across the city, and that has to change. But yeah, going forward on the design element of things, again, lighting, kind of open area that can be seen from the road.
That's
and
really
how do you
interesting,
mitigate against? Yeah, well, even how do you mitigate against skateboarding in unsociable hours? Like I think, look, you can put the sign up. I hope it works and people are respectful, but I do think it's reasonable to say there's no skateboarding here, you know, between the hours of X and Y and stuff like that, because fair enough, people do live and work here, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have to be respectful about it. And it does work actually quite well in places like Bordeaux, where they have certain hours of the week where you can skate in certain locations and others you can't. And people say, okay, that's fine. You know, it's you're not blocking people out, you're bringing them in. You're not creating this resentment. Again, the resentment that I had when I was younger, because I had this fuck you to the system attitude, because I just felt like it wasn't making the effort to communicate with me. But at the end of the day, I had to make you know, I had to communicate with it. And now that I've started doing that, I can see lights, you know, coming at the end of the tunnel here and there, and say, here's an option, possibility and opportunity, not just like these consistent walls that feel like they're being built all around you, not just at Portobello, but at Dublin more broadly, every time one of the, you know, venues or spaces that you enjoyed going to over the years is taken away from you, you know. Cities are irresistible to change, you know, but yeah, but again, it's you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel, I think, if all goes well. It's not going to be easy, you know, and it's still a flip of the coin, but I do think it could work out.
And yeah, I mean, what you've just said there was so profound, man. I was just hitting me like you felt like the system had to communicate to you, but then when you started to communicate with it, in a sense, or with some part of what's classified as a system, then you started to see progress. I think a lot of us have that kind of, is our default, that we should be given the option or something, like it should show up on a plate. Yeah. But unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. You have to kind of cross enemy lines, you know, change your perceptions. But one interesting thing, I mean, preventing antisocial behavior. Do you think that the Irish Skateboarding Association that you're going to set up is going to have some element of responsibility for that? And do you think that would be, you know, is that possible? Like, would you have to become like a footballing body, I suppose? That's like
that's essentially that actually that is it, yeah, to a degree, and I understand that, and I actually think it's kind of only right, because you know, if you create a space and you tell the council and the residents that skateboarding is going to bring nothing but positives to it, and it should be there for that reason, but then you abandon a space that maybe doesn't get used because it wasn't designed right, or you just have people who don't really have much attachment to it, then you've actually failed them. And then going forward in the future, it's possible that they'll say, yeah, we listened to you on this project before and it didn't pan out, it went terribly, so why should we listen to you again, you know? Like, as far as Portobello goes, I'll say this to the residents, and they'll say this to people when it comes time to it. If you wanted me to act as some sort of community officer, liaison officer with people there on behalf of skateboarders or whatever it is, I'll absolutely do that. And it just shows to people that you actually really care, right? And so, yeah, I do think that the ISA is going to have an important role in that going forward all across Ireland, not just in Dublin. But again, that's the idea. And it's something that I think people will gladly actually make the decision to do, you know what I mean? Look, people oftentimes, you know, fall out and there's issues here and there, but at the end of the day, if people are all moving towards this goal of wanting better spaces and better cities and better towns and whatnot, then I see no reason why, you know, someone in Limerick and Cork and Belfast and Dublin, wherever it is, isn't willing to go and negotiate with the council, or kind of, you know, say, okay, look, I'll take some responsibility for this, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, the council will have to do the same. Some residents might have to do the same. The hotel at Portobello will have to do the same. Everyone's going to have to be on some sort of negotiation or consistent communication, even, you know, about what's going on in the space, what's working and what's not. Because if you don't do that, then what happens is down the line, it ends up getting skate stopped again or something like that. Because people weren't engaging to find out what the issues were and solve them, then a harsh decision is taken to maybe skate stop it, you know, and that's what you don't want. Like, so, yeah. Yeah,
and do you think there's a conflict of values there almost, like in terms of the value of long-term skateboarding spaces that are accepted by the current establishment, and then the idea of skateboarding being this kind of lawless, you go against the grain, like, fuck authority, which it is in a lot of sense, and that's kind of part of what makes it great. But then how do you integrate that into a long-term vision of something that's actually in working with the authorities, I suppose? Like, it's like decentralized, but you're making a centralized version.
No, I entirely get what you're saying, and it's a conflict that skating is struggling with now more than ever, particularly because of the Olympics.
Fuck.
Yeah, like, I mean, look, I also think it's like partly got to do with skateboarding is just maturing as an art form, as a sport. You know, it's just it's still quite young. I mean, as far as it goes, you know, you're talking like within the last 70 years, I suppose you could say, you know, and skate culture is growing massively all the time, but it is a conflict with it. But at the end of the day, I do think, and I do find as we go forward, that people are very, very respectful of those who kind of take on these challenges, you know, with the council and whatnot. And I have to say that, like, the shining light in the world in terms of skateboarding is Malmo in Sweden, and they have taken this approach to a whole new level. I went in September on a sort of a recce to understand a little bit more about Malmo and how it operates and why it's so skate friendly. They do everything from any public space that is kind of underutilized to say, right, there's a skateboarder who works full time on the council, and they say, okay, what can we integrate here? We'll put in this obstacle, we'll make this a little bit more attractive, we'll bring some more life to the place, right? And it's amazing how they do it. They go so far as to have you know, abandoned lots, let's say, and they'll rent it to their skate association for, you know, a few quid a year or something like that, and they'll allow skateboarders to come there and DIY the place themselves, actually build their own skate parks, right? And there's no massive insurance, you know, health and safety issues, whatever it is. But what happens then is people get to learn how to build, they get to learn how to, you know, skate, and they also get to learn how to, like, you know, just basically design their cities in a way. You know, it's an absolutely amazing process. Plus, they even have their own skateboarding school that isn't somewhere where you don't go there to learn how to skate necessarily. It's their gymnasium is a skate park.
Dude, now we're getting to it. This is what?
Yeah. It's crazy, you know. And they also have classes for you know, you learn how to shoot photography or videography or do editing and stuff like that through the lens of skateboarding. Basically, that's how you learn it. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, I don't think Ireland will ever get to that stage, right? But I do think that if we took 10% of what they do there, bring it back here, we'll reap the benefits of it, you know.
That is so dope, man. That's on like the macro level of like that skateboarding as a sport maturing is a really cool idea, because that's something I'd noticed that was, I suppose, felt significant, that there is a difficulty of, you know, the values of skateboarding in general as a lawlessness, and then the values of becoming something more like a sporting body and how that would work and how it can develop. But it seems like, and I think if anybody can do it, it's definitely you, because you straddle the line between both of those things. You're a very responsible person. You're really but also love skateboarding. Whereas there might be lots of skateboarders that are just like, you know, fuck the system, don't care, you know, you're just partying. But then the flip side is, you know, how can you lead them? I mean, are you leading them towards a more responsible skateboarding attitude? Or is it just you're creating a framework in which anybody can exist in?
I just think that it's acting as a good example for younger generations coming up to see that happening, right? You know, it's like, you know, when I was younger coming up, I had one or two guys that were really, really clued in, and they were the ones who really, truly got the likes of Weaver Park across the line. And that was very inspirational for me. And it's inspirational for a lot of people. And I noticed, because I come up in the, you know, the sort of the fuck authority system, spray painting and skating anywhere I please, forever as a teenager and whatnot. You're not really given a flying fuck. But then, you know, you just get older, like, you know what I mean? You get a little bit more mature, I suppose. And I guess you're more willing to compromise or just get involved in like, to be honest with you, it's like, I could complain and I could say, well, F this and F that, but is it really going to make that much of a difference? Whereas, you know, I've seen it from a young age with the petitioning and campaigning for Weaver Park, that actually, if you do this the right way, through the right channels and for the right meaning, that you can have something that's going to have a profound impact on people's lives for a very, very long time to come. And, you know, Ireland is funny like that. In Sweden, this stuff is nearly done for you, and a lot of times, you know, because they have these systems, they're very, very well set up, and you know, a lot of thought is always put into their design processes and whatnot. Whereas in Ireland, like most things, you really have to fight, you know. But I do think that it's something worth fighting for, you know. And again, look, I amn't trying to like change the world. I just know there's a certain amount that I'm quite confident I know, and that's public space and skateboarding, you know, and how it can make a difference. And Portobello, of course, is very, very sentimentally attached to like, it's very close to my heart, basically, because I owe it quite a lot. You know, I owe skateboarding a lot, and I owe that space and the people of that area and whatnot quite a lot as well. So I've basically given back to the opportunities it's given me over the years.
Man, I feel you, and I feel the same way about it. It's a very sentimental place. And where can people support you? I mean, I'm sure loads of people are fucking energized now after listening to this, and they want to get involved, or they want to help you. You know, how can that be done?
Yeah. So the difficulty of this process, right, is that it's incredibly slow and boring, and that's why it's really hard to try and keep a lid on it to a degree. That's where it's hard for this to not become political, and that's what happened during the summer, right? And again, certain people are going to be, you know, not that happy to hear this, but you know, it is a slow process. As long as the eye is not taken off the ball, which, you know, I am not going to allow happen as much as I possibly can. And if there is a time for it, and, you know, and people aren't being reasonable from the hotel side of it, from the council side of it, wherever it is, and there's need for direct action and public support, absolutely 100% that's going to happen. You know, and I hope to not have to go down that route. I hope to have relationships done in such a way that going forward we don't ever have to do that. You know, that it's people are being reasonable enough to say, okay, yes, we can do this, we can't do that, and so on and so forth. You know, so I hope that situation of politics doesn't really have to come into this. Now, there are certain people who will try and use it for their own political gain or whatever it may be, you know, and again, like I'd say the best way for this to happen right now is to just sit tight, just keep an eye on the Goblin page. The Irish Skateboarding Association page should be posting this type of stuff, but we're just working on setting up some websites and social media stuff right now, so it can't happen just yet. So I would say the best place right now is probably the Goblin page and for news and stuff like that, you know. So I'm going to be keeping people updated as much as I can, but we are in somewhat early stages of this consultation. So far, I've talked to a couple of residents. I've talked to executives in Dublin City Council. The area managers. I have been talking to the hotel representatives, you know, and architects and skateboarders and so on and so forth. So it's just about keeping that sort of process going. And again, like, it is emotional for people. I know a lot of people are upset about that space being taken away. I'm kind of looking past that. Those contracts are signed. I always kind of knew that was going to happen anyway. I'm looking to like the future, long-term future of the design and how that space is going to look like in the future, and so that's it. But yeah, again, I'd say for updates at the minute, the Goblin page is probably the best place.
For sure, man. And we'll have to touch base again once you get the Irish Skateboarding Association off the ground, man. That's like the 100%. Coolest idea ever, man. I think there's a great thing unfolding. It even just hearing the story and seeing, you know, my intuition is that there's big things coming, and
definitely,
I feel honoured to be able to listen to it and to learn about it, man. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much, dude. Thank you for what you're doing and allowing me to come on and speak for an hour or whatever and just ramble, because it allows me to get a lot off my chest. And again, it's a lot better than the sort of short snippets you get on social media and the sort of mishmash of information and stuff like that. So thanks a million.
For sure, man. We get to hear the whole thing, but we'll do it again soon, Philly. Thanks again, brother.
All right, dude. See you, man.